Hi everyone, hoping that you all are well and welcome to our discussion. If possible, put your screen on full screen so that you can see the screen fully. And then I want to turn your attention to the screen and the middle of the screen where you see the Kingdom of Judah or the Kingdom of JUDA, Slave Coast. Please make note of the spelling of the name. At the top you see JUDA, and then you see the alternative spelling of WHIDAH. And this is so that you can get a closer look. And also make note of the fact that there is a word under Slave Coast, and it is spelled ABIER. We're going to be revisiting our prior discussions on the Kingdom of Judah, and we've had multiple discussions about this kingdom. This time, however, we are going to be focusing on getting some clarity because there are a number of questions and anomalies related to not only that map, but the history of this particular kingdom. So we are going to be looking at some of those names and deconstructing those names again. We've deconstructed the names before. We're going to expand it in terms of some of the languages because we're going to get a bit more insight about what is going on with this kingdom. If not more insight, we are going to definitely have more questions about what was going on with this kingdom. Now, this is the standard Wikipedia offering for the Kingdom of JUDA, and what you see are numerous spellings for this kingdom name, and so you see these different spellings for different languages. Please make note of the French spelling, and it is the OUIDAH. Before we go on, make note of a couple of other things on this screen. One is related to the Portuguese spelling of Judah. There is an A added to the JUDA, and that actually changes the meaning of this name. There's also a notation that the religion of Judah was the Yoruba religion, and that the ethnic groups were the Yoruba. And so this changes the entire context of this Kingdom of Judah on the west coast of Africa. By centering Yoruba with respect to this particular kingdom, it changes the entire identity of this kingdom. And so there was an assertion initially that this Kingdom of Judah was associated with what would be considered Jacob's children. However, there are other dynamics going on when Yoruba, in terms of the religion and the ethnic groups, are centered in terms of this particular kingdom. Previously, we did quite a bit of deconstruction for this particular kingdom and the names associated with the kingdom. We are going to focus on the French specifically and the Romance language dynamic of this French spelling. One thing to keep in mind with respect to the Romance languages, with respect to Latin, is that the U, the V, and the W are interchangeable. An odd dynamic comes about when you translate from the French into the Latin. And remember, French is one of the Romance languages. When you translate that JUDA from the French into the Latin, a couple of letters change. You still have the OUID, but in the Latin it ends with the IUS, and it also translates to OVIDE, which also translates to OVIDIUS. And this is a deconstruction so that you can see it more clearly. Coming from the Latin, you have these translations including OUIDIUS, OVIDIUS, and that's also purportedly the name of a Roman family. And then OVIDE and OVID. And so what you have here are changes in the meanings of this name, this kingdom of Judah, when you look at the Romance languages. So when you look at the Latin, you have something different. You don't have JUDA. When you look at the Portuguese, even, you have that A added in front of the JUDA, and it actually changes the meaning of that name. And so it's not the same as the Judah. It is a totally different meaning. And this is to help you see the process of the translation. So you can see over on the left, JUDA, it's French detected. When it's over in the Latin, however, it is that OUIDIUS and alternately OVIDE. And when you look at this in totality and you add kingdom to it, you have kingdom of JUDA. And then you have, in terms of the Latin, you have kingdom of OVIDE or OUIDIUS. And this is just so that you can see the French kingdom and then the translation into the Latin. And here you can actually see that translation of the kingdom of JUDA translated into the Latin, and you have the OUIDIUS. And even if you go back and forth with the translations, you are going to essentially have the same thing. And so you can see, coming from the Latin going into the French, you're going to have kingdom of Ovid. If you go into the Greek, you're going to have something similar. You're going to just have OVID without the E, or you will also have a variation with OVIDII. You also, in the Scots Gaelic, have just simply OVID. And this continues even if you look in the Portuguese, you're going to have the same thing coming out of the Latin into Yoruba, you're going to have OVID. Coming into the Portuguese, you're going to have OVIDIO. And if you go from the Latin into the English, it says Ovid's kingdom. And so essentially you have the kingdom of Ovid on the west coast of Africa. And here you have the translation of the OVIDE, and it translates to OVID. And so clearly there is a lack of clarity regarding the history of the west coast of Africa. And so you have this kingdom with multiple names. Even on the map, you have multiple names, and that's not common for a map. So you have this map with multiple names for this single kingdom. And when you break this down, the name of the kingdom in several languages, the name does not equate to what one would expect the name to equate to. And so even though you have the Judah there, you have the JUDA there, and then you have these transliterations in terms of JUDA that do not take you to the child of Jacob. It takes you to the Roman Empire. And this is the writing that goes with that particular name and that spelling, the OUIDIUS. Some of this might also help to make sense out of what was supposed to be the royal color for this kingdom of Judah. Interestingly, the royal color was red. And so that falls in line with a particular group of people and takes it out of line from another group of people. This is definitely something that requires a little bit more examination. We're not going to do that right now, but we're just putting that out there so that you can start to think about this entire dynamic, because there are lots of implications for this. Another oddity was noted with respect to the surname analysis. And the surnames associated with this kingdom, when it's spelled with the OUIDA or the OUIDAH, this surname was noted primarily in North Africa, specifically Morocco and Algeria. As we wrap this up, this issue requires more examination and research. There should be more research done on all of the names that are attributed to this kingdom. More examination needs to be done on the history of this kingdom. Who were these people actually? Who were the people surrounding this kingdom? Why is there a specific name for this kingdom that does not coincide with the assumed name for the kingdom or the assumed meaning of the name for the kingdom? How do you go from the kingdom of Judah to the kingdom of Ovid? How do you go from this kingdom being a kingdom of Judah to this kingdom being a kingdom of Yoruba? There are a number of questions that need to be answered with respect to this analysis. There also needs to be further analysis with respect to this kingdom and the transatlantic slave trade and the trans-Saharan slave trade. Because if this is actually a Roman kingdom masquerading as a different kingdom, that needs to be made clear. Between the west coast of Africa and the countries involved in colonizing the west coast of Africa, there should be some understanding provided regarding how a kingdom could have all of these names, what happened to the kingdom, and how the kingdom's name went from, in one language, Judah, to Ovid in another language. And what is meant by all of that? What is meant by all of these translations? And why does this kingdom have so many names? And so here we are again with the question, where is Jacob?